Shalom uvracha. Hello and blessings to everyone joining us tonight. I'm Rabbi Yoni, and this is Three Opinions, an ongoing conversation about Jewish life, culture, identity, and spirituality that embraces the age-old adage that whenever two Jews come together, there are invariably three opinions. Tonight on the stream, we are going to dive deep into the question of Jewish press and Jewish publication, the relevance and the importance of said press, and we're also going to dig into an interview that will be breaking tonight that should serve as a pretty clear example as to the role of our Jewish newspapers and the websites and how they play a role in our lives of American Jewry. So I'm thrilled and honored to be joined tonight by the editor of the Detroit Jewish News, Andrew Lapin, who was lucky enough to take on the job of keeping a local Jewish newspaper afloat at a time when readership of newspapers in general is down, and then got the added blessing of undertaking that task with a global pandemic thrown into the mix. Andrew grew up here in Metro Detroit and is a longtime journalist, film critic, podcaster, media analyst. He has written film reviews for NPR, created a column called Highbrow for Moment, been featured on WBUR's Here and Now, and was the assistant editor at Current. Andrew, your credentials and accomplishments go well beyond that short little introduction. And I encourage everyone to check out andrewlapin.org so you can be even more impressed than you are right now. But I want to dive right in. So I'll link to your website in the chat and let people do their own homework about you and start by just welcoming you and thanking you for sitting down and chatting with me.
Thank you, Rabbi Yoni. It's great to be here. I also love the name of the program, Three Opinions. It's very appropriate, especially for what we do.
Thank you. I thought it was really good. Then I realized I had to explain it a lot. So I feel like, as long as I keep explaining it, then it's going to be okay. But even people who I thought were really going to get it were just like, I don't understand the name of your program. Okay. It's a bummer. Just so you know, it's what we do as rabbis more than anything else is wordplay. That's actually how we make our careers. So I thought I was being creative, but
I too love wordplay, so I really appreciate that about the rabbinical pursuit. I think maybe that's why I've always enjoyed talking to rabbis. But yeah, happy to be here.
So first of all, tell me, how long have you been at the Jewish News now?
So I started as editor in late January, so it's been almost exactly 6 months. And 4 of those months have been from quarantine. So you can imagine this is a really tumultuous time to be doing this job. It's very hectic. There's so much going on all the time, and we're a weekly print publication, so the frequency is really intense. We have to have a cover story and all these pages prepared every week, and then we're doing a lot online every day as well. So and with a small staff. So there's a lot going on. I feel like I barely got settled into my office before being sent home, but we take it as it comes. That's what the news industry is all about.
For sure. So maybe even before COVID, but especially now in this age of COVID, what have been like some of the biggest challenges of trying to get this all worked out? Is it, especially when I hadn't even thought of doing covers and everything. So I'm sure the photography aspect is actually a really tough thing to do right now too.
Photography is always a lot to do. We often ask the subjects we're writing about to send us photos maybe that they have of themselves, but it has to be a certain quality in order to print well, because we have this new format. Longtime readers probably know this, but we switched our Jewish News format last year, I believe. So it was before my time, to make it more of a magazine as opposed to a weekly newspaper. And so there's a much stronger emphasis now on visual elements, particularly the cover. And we have a couple photographers, freelance, who will send out into the field to get photos that we need. And so we do want to be present in that space, but we are pretty limited by, if it's a really good story with no photos, it becomes a lot harder for us to figure that out. So that is definitely a challenge. More broadly speaking, and we'll probably get to this a little later, but like the biggest challenge we're facing now as a publication is just how do we find new readers, new subscribers, a new sort of critical mass of people who really love our work and are willing to pay for it or otherwise support it. That's a problem facing like every news organization from top to bottom. It's hit especially hard with local publications, and especially hard with, what we call like niche interest publications, which like we're a specialty publication. We reach a very concentrated audience of the Detroit Jewish community. So we really need to be able to penetrate into that audience as deeply as we can. And with a new generation that isn't used to subscribing to things in print, and maybe has different questions than the older generation does about their own Jewish identity and their own community and where they fit into that, it's a pretty tall order for us to try to like synthesize all of that and bring all of our readership together into like a common gathering place where we can be the voice of Jewish Detroit that people expect us to be. So that all of that, we're just trying to figure out what the present of the Detroit Jewish News looks like and what the future is. It's a long-standing publication. It's been around for 78 years. We want to make sure it'll be here for at least 78 more. So, whether that means looking beyond print, beyond digital, finding other ways to inhabit the Jewish Detroit space. These are all conversations we're having right now, and it's definitely going to be an uphill battle over the next few years, but it's one I'm also really excited to take on.
Awesome. So we're going to get right into that. I just want to say before we even go in, I love the fact that I want us to talk about a few things tonight that I know are going to be a little bit more controversial and a little bit more probably hit some people in the kishkas, but I don't think anything is going to hit them in the kishkas more than talking about the change of format from the old paper to the magazine style.
Maybe the post office though, because people because the post office has had so many cuts, people aren't getting their magazines on time. So that's another huge thing.
Oh, I didn't know that. I just know that from my 5 years, about 5 years being here now, that I've seen some things in the Jewish news that have been more controversial, some things that have sparked some conversation. Nothing that I've seen has sparked as much conversation as when the format changed. So, we'll get into some of that. But apologies for anyone listening who's a longtime reader that we're not going to spend more time talking about the format shift. So that's for a different time and a different day, and that conversation will go on for years, I'm sure. So I want to start off with just kind of a broad question, and honestly, we could talk about this question by itself for hours, but what brought you specifically to this? I mean, why is the success of a local Jewish newspaper important to you? And the follow-up to that is, why should it be important to us?
Well, I wanted to take this job because I grew up with this paper. I know firsthand how important the Detroit Jewish News is. My graduation notice ran in the cap and gown issue. It's a deeply ingrained facet to me of the Jewish Detroit community. And it's one that I think is really vital right now when you look at the struggles of Judaism in the modern day, right? There are a lot of reasons why we need Jewish press and local Jewish press, especially. Being back in Detroit has been a real thrill because the Detroit area is so rich with history. It's so rich with meaning and I think purpose for the Jewish community. And to me, it's like we have to be there to cover it. We have to be this indispensable source of information and commentary for the Jewish community because we are really helping to lift everyone up and support it. There's so much to say out there, and there's so much fear and risk of disinformation and disconnectivity, like just not being able to relate to people or to your neighbors as easily as you were a generation or two ago. I know that congregations are feeling this as well, and so I recognize all of these are as just vitally important dialogue to have, and I want the Jewish community to survive. I feel very strongly about that, and so I wanted to take on this challenge. I think it's really crucial to figuring out the answers to all those questions.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think you're right to connect the idea of the paper itself also to congregations. I think that there is an intricate relationship there, and I think caring about Jewish community is also linked to caring about Judaism, right, as a whole. It's one of the delicate balancing acts and dances that we do as clergy as well, is to try to figure out, here's this big theological part of who we are, right? We're a religion. And at the same time, we're also a peoplehood that cares about culture and identity and who we are. And especially in a place like Detroit that has such deep Jewish roots here, how to identify like those roots and talk about those roots and pay attention to those as a significant part of who we are. And I think that, and this is me projecting here, admittedly, because I know I'm guilty of this, but I think for a lot of people too, that we take for granted that idea of local journalism, right? And even local Judaism as a whole and congregations too, that we, in the age of information and the internet, many of us, our default is to go straight to sources that might echo our general worldview instead of learning about and engaging with our own city or community. So that can be from just signing on and going to mainstream big papers or big sources of news and information, but it can also be now in the age of COVID and even in congregations, going to whichever congregation you want in the country or in the world, because now we're kind of in our own little bubbles and at home. So how do we get people to focus on the importance of what it means to be a local community, to focus on the news and the journalism and the stories that are happening in our own city?
It's a really good question. We're figuring that out every day. So my publisher, Arthur Horowitz, who was the one who brought me on to the role and has really placed a tremendous amount of trust and faith in me, he likes to say that, a lot of our readers and subscribers now think of us more as this product that they're paying for, right? That it's like a value proposition, that they give us money and they expect a certain something in return. And when they don't get that, they can sometimes, become upset. And so that, that's largely a relationship we've been managing. But he and I would like people to see us more as a community agreement, that we're a publication that is essential for the health and survival of the Jewish community, to provide a space for conversation that maybe you're not getting at shul, or to touch on larger issues that we know to be of vital importance to the Jewish community, like the global rise of anti-Semitism, the decline in Holocaust awareness, these kinds of things that we know people are anxious about it and upset about it, and we know that we need spaces in which to talk about it. And so we're here, and we want people to know that for as long as they will support us, we will always be here. That is our intention. As for changing reader habits, there's a degree to which we are responsible for meeting readers where they are. And so if people are migrating away from the print edition, we need to find other ways to find them. But we also do need to just establish for people that local news is important, that Jewish publications are important, and hopefully, if there are enough people out there who care about their Jewish identity, and believe that we can speak directly to that, then we can kind of overcome that barrier. I come from the role of public radio and nonprofit media, and there they talk a lot about memberships instead of subscriptions. So the idea is that what you're paying for isn't a product. You are paying to show your support and to be a part of a community that values information and really wants a space where you can trust the information that you're getting. And especially right now, public broadcasters really need a lot of support. But that's kind of what we're looking towards as an ideal, is to have that kind of level of trust with readers, where we can't even fathom, forget not getting your issue, getting your issue a few days late 1 week, but like not getting your issue at all. And like, what would that vacuum mean for the Jewish community, and what do we do to prevent that from happening? So yeah, it's definitely, we still have a lot of work to do on that front. And, a lot of it is personal outreach and just letting people in the community know that we're there. And that's what I tried to do. I'm hoping to do more community events, coffee talks and other things, because I want to hear from our readers. I want to hear from people who trust us, or maybe, don't trust us anymore, and why that might be. There's just a lot that I know needs to be done on that front, and I want to be there, and I want people to know that we as a publication will continue to be there and that we care about them.
So that's a really staggering challenge too, with the idea of knowing that you want to have this agreement, right? That this is a membership of a community, and you want to be able to provide fact, and you want to be able to provide story, and you want to be able to provide information. But especially in the world that we're in right now, where it's so much about consumers saying, "I want you to give me what I paid for," right? That's a really difficult balancing act, and especially when you're dealing with a paper that's been around for 78 years, where there's different values attached to that paper. So I'm going to already start upsetting people. But just for the record, the idea of what we're doing here for Three Opinions is to have these conversations in an informal setting and to really wrestle over some of the topics that are relevant to who we are as Jews today. And I know that this is going to hit some nerves with some folks, but it's okay. It's time to do that. So let me start upsetting people by saying you have inherited a publication that is highly regarded in Jewish Detroit. People love the Jewish news, and people, like you said, grew up with the Jewish news. But also part of that love is a bit of a nostalgic love at the same time, right? So the paper is 78 years old, and I'd imagine that the demographics of your readership have to skew to older readers. So how do you hold on to that hamishness and give people what they want as far as the nostalgic element, while also pushing the paper to be not just relevant, but critical and necessary, especially for younger folks who are relying on you for a completely different product?
Absolutely, yeah, I would agree. I think the perception of the Jewish news is that we skew older, and there's a lot of truth to that, especially in our print subscribers, who remain our most valuable, asset, because you can read our content online, but you're probably not paying for it there. So we do, we still really encourage people to subscribe to print, but most of the people who want to get the print publication are older or have had it, for years, and that's just kind of what they do. And so we're not really converting a lot of new subscribers. I am very mindful of this challenge. I think probably the toughest task from an editorial perspective is bridging that generational gap and providing coverage that our more senior readers depend on and need, but also opening the dialogue up in such a way that we can bring in younger readers as well. We do a lot of history coverage, but we try to not let the past stay in the past and find ways to newly contextualize and bring to the forefront a lot of what we know about Jewish Detroit history, particularly through our digital archive, which people can access at djnfoundation.org. And you can see like every Jewish news that's ever been published. So that's a really wonderful resource. People care about history, but we also try to like bring that into the forefront. And we know, like, when people talk about being Jewish now, and even like people of my generation and younger, so much of being Jewish is about being connected to a history of a people, right? We are constantly taking lessons from the past. And trying to apply them to the future. I mean, that's what a lot of new Judaism is kind of based around. People can draw different lessons from the past, but we're still all sort of mining it as a resource. And so, there's that respect where we do want to do that and provide some sense of familiarity and comfort, but also push the needle a little bit and try to be in the spaces that we think are really valuable to be in right now. I have this habit of really trying to, not necessarily in like a malicious or deliberate way, but I think some of the stories that commission do push buttons, and we've done a fair amount of those already, and because I really want to spark a discussion in the community. I want people to understand that Judaism isn't just about writing about things that happened 50 or 100 years ago, or Torah passages, but is really like in the here and now, and every day we have to apply Jewish values to the latest news developments and to our own communities, and how do we do that, and so that's what excites me about the role, and I hope that along the same lines of Two Jews, Three Opinions, like, people appreciate a good dialogue and like a good space in which to have it, and so we want to be welcoming to everyone to do that and to have conversations that maybe people are not having on their own. So yeah, from that perspective, there's still a lot that we have to do to convince, younger people or new subscribers, new to Detroit, whatever, that that we're here for them, that we have their interests at heart. But to not abandon the people who got us here and who have continued to support us over the decades. I absolutely don't want to do that. I want everyone to be part of the same conversation.
I love that. I mean, that's also just really hard, right? I acknowledge that it's so hard. But at the same time, it's just critical. And it's the same thing that I think that we try to do as rabbis too, which is to say that Judaism shouldn't be seen as like a museum, right? You don't come into a synagogue so you can hope to see like, oh, look how cool Judaism used to be. And they used to have these things behind glass that you're not supposed to touch. And but it should be like a laboratory in some way where you're diving in and making it relevant to you now. In the same way as of Jewish Detroit, which has incredible history, but that incredible history of Jewish Detroit also informs exactly our Jewish Detroit right now, right? And I think it's important to engage, especially with younger folks, in that capacity too, because in some ways the old Jewish Detroit carries a lot of romance and whimsy in our minds, because for a lot of folks who grew up here in Jewish Metro Detroit, a lot of them grew up in the suburbs and, West Bloomfield and then Southfield and Farmington Hills, which doesn't have the same kind of mystique and the same kind of romanticization as, the Purple Gang in Northwest Detroit and some of this other stuff. And that's a really great tool, I think, for being able to capture some of our curiosity and the enthusiasm there, but at the same time to really understand how impressive Detroit is right here and right now at the same time, especially for younger folks. And I want to give a quick shout out to Laura Williams at Bethel, who's just awesome. And I could watch her videos like every single day of how she does this archiving and digging up some really beautiful stuff about Detroit, but then making it applicable for who we are today. And to see her excitement, like I wish we could all be that excited about Jewish Detroit in the here and the now too, because I think that's meaningful and I think that's important. So I want to press you a little bit on the question of how some of the younger readers, even if they're not getting subscriptions, I know that you guys are on social media and on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I want to ask particularly about Instagram, because I think that's going to be the platform that caters to a lot of people in like my age range. So people on Instagram who are following you, what are they clicking on the most, and what are they engaging with the most?
Oh man, I guess I should have done a deeper dive into Instagram. So we have about 2,800 Instagram followers.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's good, and that's been, that's sort of an exponential growth, because we really only just started putting a lot of focus on Instagram in recent months, and that's about half or so of our Facebook followers who are more engaged, and Facebook being a text-based platform, that's generally where a lot of the discussions tend to happen. What we see, what's really interesting, this probably reflects broader social trends. The stories that do very well on Instagram tend to be more of like good news stories, or things about sort of interesting topics or events that are happening in the Jewish Detroit community. People, recognizable people, especially young people, so that they can share it with their friends. That's where we've seen a lot of our success across all social platforms, but especially Instagram. So we're definitely conscious of that. And, the Jewish News has always been a community paper. We know one of the things people love about it is that we can put their face on the cover and we can talk about all the interesting things that, people in the community are doing, what, groups they're a part of, all that kind of thing. And so that's something we really want to keep pushing, and I think the hard news tends to do better on Facebook, and through kind of other channels where people get their news. So, we don't want to just be all news all the time. And so it is really valuable to look at the younger demographic and what people are doing on Instagram. Our sister publication, Scene Magazine, which is owned by the same a local media company that the Jewish News is owned by. So they're more of like a general lifestyle publication. They've put a lot of emphasis on Instagram, and that's where they have like sort of a major concentration of their readership. And so we've been taking lessons from them as well on how to make Jewish content more interesting and relevant to the Instagram audience. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So along with that, I just feel so much more comfortable as a millennial being kind of in the Instagram world, because like you said, it just has so much more of like, I think our generation kind of gets mocked for, taking pictures of food and like outside and like weird filters in an outside setting. But for me, there's so much vitriol and anger going on in kind of other platforms that for me, like that, those are the things that I like to follow, especially from a community perspective, because those are like those feel more community building to me. And it's like, I will be completely honest. I love the Jewish news. We have a paper subscription to the Jewish news. Like we get it every week. I have never once read the comments on Facebook because I know I don't want to.
Totally fair.
And because I know without having ever read them, the people that's drawing it there and what kind of the anger and the hostility just kind of naturally comes up from that. So am I right in that assumption, or should I go read the Facebook comments?
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you go read the Facebook comments if you're worried about avoiding anger and hostility. Yeah, I think that's an ongoing problem for most news platforms on Facebook, but we do try to monitor it and be kind of diligent. And I have rules about when we need to block someone from our account and hide their comments and things like that, because I don't want it to turn into an incredibly hostile environment. That's a tricky line to walk and always has been. That being said, I do really it's tough because I want to find a way to engage in dialogue with readers beyond the places where we have sort of the usuals who will respond to us, and that tends to be on Facebook and also in emails, like letters to the editor, sent to me, phone mails, that kind of stuff. We know that's like a certain audience, right? And so I really do want to know what other members of the Jewish community think, because I don't think the people I hear from speak for everyone. But reaching that has always been a bit of a challenge. I will say that food has always been a really crucial part of the Jewish experience. So I would love to do, and I think we are planning to do more with food and more with community building on Instagram and other platforms. Because that doesn't feel like a betrayal to me. I think that is part of our mission and part of what we can do really well. People love to read about local restaurants and talk about Jewish food, and there's a hunger for that kind of a thing.
Unintended, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but at the same time, we have to be on Facebook because there's a lot of our audience there, and we hope that the people who choose to engage with us there find something valuable about it and aren't just angry for its own sake. But certainly there's always more work to be done on that front.
Which is so ironic that is especially for a community newspaper, right? I can kind of understand hostility being if you're in kind of the anonymous settings of a bigger publication on Facebook. But in theory, one of the beautiful things of the Jewish news, right, is that we all kind of know each other as a small Jewish community in Detroit. So the fact that there's still so much hostility and anger towards people in a way that is not so community building is a bummer.
And I think that speaks to a larger need for a community place where we can all come together, because clearly people are not listening to each other, to their neighbors, their Jewish neighbors, in normal social settings, or we wouldn't be so far apart from each other on these things, right? And so that's one of the really essential things that we can do, is people from very different ideologies come to us and trust us. And you can't say that about too many media outlets today. And the reason why is because we have a common understanding of Judaism and of our mutual desire to protect and grow upon our Jewish community.
Right. So I think a easy transition here is to go and talk about the very safe decision to come out with a really non-controversial story today that I can't imagine. If I'm going to start reading the Facebook comments, I think I'll start today. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, I just want to let folks know that today you came out with not just one, which would be I think probably shocking enough in itself, but uh, you came out with three different components to this, right? So the Jewish News came out today with an interview with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, but also a column about her controversial status in the Detroit Jewish community, as well as your editor's note explaining the decision to interview her and publish the interview. And for the record, I let's start there, because I think, for my personal opinion, I think it was really, really well done, the way that you released all three of them, and especially with the editor's note to kind of talk about your decision to do this. And I won't talk about it too much because I want you to. But I think that was a really important component to what you did today. So tell us a little bit about the interview itself, but then also your decision to do it the way that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So Congresswoman Tlaib is, I think, the number one source of anxiety, fear, consternation, general unease among Detroit's Jewish community.
Which, again, to your credit, the cool part about the interview was like, that's the very first thing you said to her, which is like, you're public enemy number one to a lot of people. How do you respond to that? But yeah, that's already like such a bold way to do that.
Yes. And so to me, like, because there was that essential fact, and she has had this status among the Jews in Metro Detroit since she was elected to Congress in 2018, that there was a clear journalistic reason to interview her and to discuss the Jewish response to her more broadly. I've gotten already a lot of response to people saying, why would you do this? Well, this is why we did it. I mean, like, we hear constantly from people about Rashida Tlaib. There was a reason to talk to her. The Jewish News has tried many times since 2018 to talk to her. So predating me, this wasn't something I came in and, pounded my fist on the desk and demanded. It had always been in the works. And there were a few very obvious news pegs this time, because her primary is coming up. It is a fairly competitive primary, although polling isn't that great. But there was this clear reason, or there was like an avenue for Detroit's Jews who are very politically active to attempt to get her out of office if they so chose to, and many are in fact not choosing to do that. So there was a clear interest on that level. There was a story there. There was also a new PBS documentary that talked about her initial campaign, focusing on her historic status as the first Palestinian woman in Congress. And with kind of everything going on with Black Lives Matter and COVID, her district has been hit particularly hard by a lot of this. And so there were all these reasons why it was like, okay, now seems like a very good moment to talk to her. And if we don't do it now, we may miss our chance. We may not be able to do it. And so that was something that, that's kind of inherent in, I guess, who I am. And it's like the only way I know how to do my job is to, like, when everyone's talking about something, like, let's try to lean into it. Because if I can talk the talk about wanting to provoke conversations among the Jewish community, but if we're not actually finding the things that people are having conversations about, we're not really doing that, are we? So I never want to play it too safe. So that was kind of, that was altogether why it seemed like this was a valuable conversation, specifically for us to have as the voice of Detroit's Jewish community, to be able to directly, I would say, confront or address key issues that our community has had with an influential member of Congress from the area. So even though there are not a lot of Jews who live in Tlaib's district, the fact that she has been such a vocal critic of Israel on the national stage and has so much just has played like this huge kind of outsized role in the national dialogue for a freshman congresswoman, there was a clear reason in my view. It was like, if she agrees to do it, we would obviously do it. And so eventually she did agree to it. And so that's all that together. And I tried to explain this in the editor's note. And then, we also, our terrific reporter, Maya Goldman, wrote the accompanying piece about the larger Jewish response to her, which
was really great, which is really, that accompanying piece is awesome. I think it was really
Maya's a fantastic reporter. We're very lucky to have her. fresh out of University of Michigan. Shout out to the Michigan Daily, which I also was an alumni of. But yeah, so one of the things her story touches on, people can read about, is that Tlaib's challenger, Brenda Jones, Detroit City Councilwoman, has ties with Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And so this opens up questions of like, okay, if your line is like, we don't want, we don't want someone in office who is perceived as a danger to the Jewish community, like what is your, how do you rank those things? How do you approach this race? So again, a clear dilemma, a clear narrative, like a thing that seems like it needs to be talked about in a Jewish Detroit space. So all of those things together, that was why we decided on this package, and we felt that it was necessary to like explain to people why we were doing it, as I often try to do when I'm pushing a little bit against the grain. And so I hope that people will kind of understand that and take the time to read it and internalize it. But I also completely understand that some people may be upset and may want to talk about it, and I welcome that as well.
Well, here's hoping that we talk about it, right? I mean, that's the whole point. And for those of you who don't understand the title of Three Opinions, I think this perfectly encapsulates it, right? Which is the idea of, and you said in your editor's note, we've gotten so many letters that have said, when are you going to do something about Rashida Tlaib? And then as soon as you have an interview with Rashida Tlaib, some of those same people, I guarantee you, are also the ones saying, why would you do this? Why would you have the interview, right? So there's the catch-22 here. But also talking about what you had earlier, the conversation we had earlier, which is the idea that no doubt when some people said that, when are you going to do something about Rashida Tlaib? They explicitly meant, when are you as a paper going to call her out and renounce her? And then that there's other Jews who are Jews in Detroit who are in her district, and many Jews in the city of Detroit itself who have a really good and positive relationship with Rashida Tlaib, who could easily say the same thing back and say, when are you going to do something about Rashida Tlaib, and endorse her through your paper? And there's always that idea of that conversation that's putting you in the middle, and instead of actually coming together and having the dialogue. So I'm hoping that this interview does that, because I think that that's an important thing. And I really, really encourage everyone to read the article, all three of them, the interview itself, the accompanying piece, and your editor's note too, because all three of them work really, really beautifully together to kind of explain the situation we're in, the atmosphere. And the interview is really good. And I think it's really just really bold too, which is one of the reasons that I really wanted us to talk about it, is that there's not like walking on eggshells to make sure that everyone's happy. Like I said earlier, the very first thing you said is you're public enemy number one to a lot of people. Like, that's bold, right? It's allowing her to kind of talk about those different things. And I don't want to talk too much about the interview itself, because I want people to read it, and hopefully to head over to Facebook, I guess, or anywhere else in the Jewish news, to be able to have the conversation and have the dialogue. Because go on Instagram, take a picture of your sandwich, and then we'll talk about Rashida Tlaib after. But it was good, and I think it was really, really insightful. But I'm also wondering if you also wanted to make a statement with doing it as an interview and not just the accompanying piece, to also say, like, there's this huge crisis going on in journalism right now. And again, we have about 15 minutes, so we can tackle this topic in 15 minutes, right? But all the way from the Tom Cotton op-ed in the New York Times and all these other things that have been happening, which is saying, where are we actually having dialogue? Whose voice is the correct voice to print? And does it have to meet an ethical standard or a moral standard of who's saying what is morally right, as opposed to who has the loudest megaphone, or as to who's saying something controversial? And I think you're publishing this interview is a pretty loud cry of saying, we're here to have the conversation, right? Instead of coming down in some specific camp on one or the other. And I'm wondering if you did that as kind of an intentional way of also kind of addressing what's just going on in print right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely intentional in the sense that in order for me to make the case that the Detroit Jewish News is relevant and holds a key place in our community, is that we can do this, which no one else could have done right? That no one else was in a position to do an interview like this with her, to attempt to speak to the concerns of Jewish Detroit and I hope represent them fairly and accurately. So there's a clear reason for that. Your viewers might not know this, but broadly speaking, Jewish journalism is really in a crisis point, and that was happening before COVID. But just in the last 2 weeks, I think, the New York Jewish Week canceled its print publication and laid off several staff. So this is New York, right? Like,
right. There are some Jews in New York.
There are a few. The Canadian Jewish News shut down. I think there was a lot of cutbacks in a UK Jewish paper. The Forward ceased its print edition a while back. So there are all these cases of really we're hitting this inflection point. People have to decide to care about Jewish journalism in a much more deliberate and impactful way than they have in the past. And so to do that, we just have to show people that we're here and that our presence matters. I absolutely think having these conversations is crucial for the role of what we do and what we hope to do. We know there is an audience for this kind of content, or there are at the very least things that have been unspoken. I think, and people want a space to do that. And if they want to attack me for it, that's fine. At least they're talking, a little bit of progress at a time. But yeah, I mean, I am very worried about those things. I think there's a tendency among the broader population, not Jewish, to underestimate or misinterpret what anti-Semitism is and what the needs of the Jewish community are. We see that a lot. I think in the last week there have been several celebrities, entertainers, whoever who have come out with like really abhorrent, statements and conspiracy theories about the Jewish people. And so, who else, if not the Jewish press, is going to address these things and pave some sort of a pathway for dealing with them? So, I certainly don't have any illusions that we're going to solve all the world's, problems with Jews. But we're a place to start, and we're a place to start with this community. And I just think it's so important to do. And so I do hope people recognize that and understand why we did it and why we will continue to do the hard work of trying to have these Jewish conversations, and that people hopefully, at the end of the tunnel will deem it necessary and prudent to lend us some support. That's my hope.
I hope so too. And I think here's what I would say about it. I think what you did is courageous in the sense that it's pressing and tackling a really difficult topic, but doing so at a local level. And I think that that's crucial. It's easy to kind of go into the shift into the Jewish realm of kind of more the safe media, where you can talk about the Deshaun Jackson stuff and focus nationally and Nick Cannon and all these other things that are happening right now and focus there. But that opens it up, and you're in the same category then as Tablet and the Forward and everyone else who's already having this conversation. But what you're doing is so important to our identity as Detroit Jews, as saying this is a conversation that Jews around the country are having about Rashida Tlaib, but it feels different to us because we live here and she's our representative, right? She's not, I don't live in the 13th district, so she's not technically my representative, but she's someone who represents my state and someone who feels very close to our community. And I know that for a lot of Jews, before Rashida Tlaib was in, even in Congress, she's had a long history with different relationships to the Jewish community here. So she's someone who's been here for a long time, and part of the conversation in a way that she's not for Jews who are living in, Brooklyn or the Upper West Side or Florida as well, and that's important. And that's the conversation that needs to happen, because you're in a unique place where you can have this conversation with her and also say, by the way, hopefully we can find a way as a Detroit Jewish community to also speak with her. If you feel like you need to call her out on some things, maybe she can respond. You live here, she's representing you.
Absolutely, right. When other people talk about Rashida Tlaib, other Jewish publications or general publications, they're talking about the tweets right? They're talking about maybe something that Netanyahu has said. They're like, I could go to her district. I could meet her face to face. Like we could have, I can talk to people. I can talk to Jews who live in her district, Jews who support her, Jews who really don't support her, who feel much more personally about her because she's here. So yeah, again, that's another thing. I mean, we've always known it to be true that what happens in Detroit like reverberates across the entire country. We've known that for generations. One of my pet projects, or maybe unhealthy obsessions, is Father Coughlin from the Great Depression, who had a nationally syndicated radio show out of Royal Oak that he used to spew anti-Semitic content and really drastically changed the the matter of public opinion about Jews leading up to World War II. So Detroit has always had a crucial role to play in this discussion. And as long as we are still here, I feel like it is our duty as the voice of Jewish Detroit to find a way to address that in a way that other publications can't. So.
And I think it also is a reminder for us to just be able to take advantage of our local Jewish community, right? I'm struck by I think it was this year or I think it was last year, where some people who I know who are very outspoken critics of Rashida Tlaib said, I saw Rashida Tlaib at the menorah in the D that Chabad does, the big menorah lighting down in Detroit. And I really just wanted to give her a piece of my mind. It's like, you can't. That's the whole beautiful thing about living where you're living. She's one of your elected officials. Like, you have this great opportunity to be able to say, like, listen, Congresswoman, I'm a Jew and I live here, and I know that you are here at this Jewish event representing Detroit and representing this city and this metro area. And I want to be able to have this conversation, or at least be able to. And one of the things that, to her credit, and again, I don't want to go too much into the interview itself, I'll let people kind of parse that out. But to her credit, she said, my door's open. Talk to me. If you want to talk to me, talk to me. And I think that that's something that we have to be able to take people up on, especially when it's happening in our own backyard, to be able to say if there are issues here, and our publication is going to be able to speak to them. It's obviously something that they care about too. Otherwise, they wouldn't, agree to do an interview with you. I mean, there's also primaries and politics and everything else involved. I get that. I understand that. I'm not naive, but that's also important to say, like, people's voices are important. And especially for our politicians, if they don't care about our voice, that's when we should really be probably the most concerned. So here's hoping that dialogue continues and continues to build, and instead of us just kind of going and retreating to our own little corners and fuming and getting mad and having our kind of righteous indignation, that we can speak to one another and talk about how we can make our community better.
Of course, we are forced in this moment to have retreated into our corners physically.
Right.
So definitely, not ideal timing for that.
So as far as a public safety message goes, stay in your bubbles, stay in your little four corners. But yeah, exactly.
Fine, do it virtually. Whatever you feel like is best. I do legitimately want to hear from people. I think this this is maybe sort of a litmus test for things that don't get talked about enough in local Jewish communities. And I don't want to leave people out of the conversation. I don't want to be in a position. I've made this very clear. I don't want to be in a position of saying who is and is not Jewish based on their political opinions. That's not something I've ever wanted to do, and I don't think the Jewish news should play that role. So anyone who considers themselves a part of the Detroit Jewish community and wants to engage in a dialogue about it, you are welcome. And I hope I've made that clear to everyone.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess I'm hopeful, but I'm also disheartened that is a theme that has come up in at least 3 of these conversations now on 3 Opinions, is people talking about saying who's Jewish and who's not Jewish, especially coming from Jewish voices. And to me, that is just like the most difficult thing I can hear, is that there's enough hatred and there's enough anti-Semitism in the world without us being kind of wiping each other's identity away. And sometimes, I mean, everyone knows that families are the ones who can fight the hardest. But I think we need to remind ourselves that we can fight hard, but we still have to be able to say that person's still in my family, right? It goes to a different place when you say, by the way, I'm not even going to engage with you because I don't consider you my brother or my sister.
it's so hard to do, and I don't want to do that. I never want to shut down conversation. I'll put in a quick plug. I mentioned this in the Talib interview, but we are engaging in this year-long. We're calling it the Anti-Semitism Project, where we try to do deeper dives, reports, and opinion pieces, and all that kind of thing around the question of what anti-Semitism and hate and bigotry is, and what they look like in the year 2020. So I think this is a crucial part, to play in all that. We've done other features just in the last few months. I'm very proud of. Maya wrote a feature about the synagogue protesters in Ann Arbor and the lawsuit that's unfolding there. I did a feature about a reformed leader of America's largest neo-Nazi movement who lives in Detroit. That one I was expecting a lot of blowback, by the way. I received almost none. People were largely found the story very moving and very fascinating and relevant to our audience. So that gave me a lot of hope, that we can have difficult conversations about things like anti-Semitism, which we know our readers care deeply about, without delving into, I guess, shouting matches and, Facebook comment wars and that kind of a thing. So yeah, that's another way we are trying to be intentional about being in the spaces that will help our readers understand that we are here for them, and we are here to facilitate conversations in a responsible manner.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. And in the spirit of that, in the same vein, I'm going to put in our chat and in when we start pushing this out after everything too, put some links to the articles that we're talking about, to the Jewish news in general. And we also have a great Facebook group through Shari Tzedek that's called Torah Maps. I'll put it out there too, where we try to continue the conversation and do so in a respectful way, and try to get away from, like you said, the shouting matches and the Facebook wars, and go into real dialogue and having the conversation. So in that spirit, know that we are big fans of the Jewish news. We love the Jewish news. We're always happy to talk to anyone from the Jewish news, and especially you, Andrew. And we really appreciate your time and having the conversation with me, and here's hoping to continue it. And I have a million other questions that I wanted to talk about, so we can save those for another time. I don't think that the news is going to stop being crazy and controversial anytime soon. So hopefully we can talk again. And again, thank you for taking the time, and we'll make sure that we link up so that the conversations can continue.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I'm glad to be here. I hope people find it valuable. Anytime, I'm happy to talk.
Love it. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And again, go check out the articles that came out today. Really, really great reads. And we appreciate it. Thank you so much. Take good care, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.